Thank you so much for watching and listening to my show, William Wallace for America. Of course, if you're watching me on Rumble or YouTube, you can hear me on podcasts, on every podcast apps at William Wallace for America. I am always looking for not only people that are involved in our community, things that tie us together like freedom and liberty, entrepreneurism, capitalism, the things that not only make our country great, but make our communities great. And I find it necessary to give you that sort of introduction for the person that I'm bringing on today is doing just that. Not only is she an entrepreneur, not only is she involved on a state level, but she's involved very much in our country. She has a lot of opinions on all of them. And I think you'll find this interview extremely interesting because you'll find somebody who takes the time out of her busy day to be involved in the community. With me today is Dianne Andrews. Thank you, Dianne, so much for being on the show today. I really appreciate you.
Thank you, and I appreciate you, William. It's good to see you.
Absolutely. Well, I met you when you're just starting to get involved a little bit more as I knew it. But then when I started to get to know you and realize how long you've always been involved in our community, but
Yeah.
your entrepreneurism and how you blend that in with your activism and your love of country and the books that you've written, I think is to tell a very interesting story because I think when people learn about you, they're going to learn things that they can do themselves to get the word out and be involved. Would you say that's true?
I'd say definitely that's true. If everybody, at the end of a lot of my television shows, I say, if everybody lit just one little candle, what a bright world this would be. I saw that on a spiritual show when I was a little girl, and it has stuck with me all my life. They ended the show lighting a candle, a white candle. I do that a lot in my shows, and it's something that sticks with you because if you light the bright light, you can shine up the world if everyone does.
I
Use that.
love that.
Yeah.
So when you got involved, I want people you tell people your story about the businesses that you had and have now. But when you started your first business, did you realize that one day you might have a show and talking about I'm gonna say conservative values
Yes.
because I know that's what you're very proud of, and I know that you've got the largest conservative TV show in America in Louisiana, as you put it. Where people can see it a lot. I know you like to let us know that. But did you know that one day you would take your entrepreneurial skills to become a conservative talk show host?
I did not. And that, things just kind of, I said, maybe if I had planned all this better, it would be a lot bigger. But they just kind of happened. I started my career at 19. I have a Bachelor of Science in Mathematics and Computer Science. I started with IBM. And I ended up in Houston on the working on the space shuttle on a similar language, right? Who would think, right? At that time. And then I moved on up in IBM marketing divisions, process reengineering work. But I lived in New York for a while with IBM, and I started a seminar business named Promoting Success, where it would teach people about if you wanted to be a corporate, it had 3 tracks, and you could take the track of self development, of corporate development, and of entrepreneurial development. So you could pick and choose the things
Mhm.
that you wanted to take. So I've always had the entrepreneurial has always been a part of me. I think I get that from my father. He had 3 or 4 businesses going, and my mother was a stay-at-home mom. But I think I'm a lot like my father.
I love it.
My memory comes from my mother. He was very bright too, but my
So
mother.
not only is it in your DNA, but the apple didn't fall far from the tree, right?
I know nature and nurture. Yes,
So what was your first business venture?
that was it. Promoting success.
Okay. And
Seminar.
then and then as you went on, as you developed that business and as you got further in your career, when did you start writing your books?
The first book I wrote was in 2005, and that was a fiction, Third Man Out, and it ends in New Orleans. And I've written 2, 3 years ago. I wrote the sequel to that. I have a script for Third Man Out, so my goal is to one day get that made into a movie. But I tell people I've been so busy doing things, I never have time to sell things. Right?
Right, right.
I'm doing 3, 4 things at a time, and maybe I just like Donald Trump loves the art of the deal. I've got to learn how to do the deal instead of just doing the deed. So
Right.
yeah, it's the last book, the fiction that I've written. That's not my last book. I wrote a book on COVID, And I spoke about that to several Republican women's groups, and the true story of what really happened and what Donald Trump and his administration really did. It's much more than getting the vaccines out. The fastest vaccine ever in the history of the world is what they did. But Johnson and Johnson had a contract too. What they did, they paid it forward. You know, they paid them to do the research and development. They gave them billions of dollars up front so they could get it out and they not have to worry about raising money, even though they're rich, the pharmaceutical companies, to get the vaccine out. So all they had to do was go research and development. They had the money to go do that right away, and they did do it right away in 11 months. But of course, in 21, it wasn't tested the way it should have been on children. And DNA, as people know, the flu vaccine, we get a new one every year. That's because the DNA strand changes. And pneumonia is every 3 years. The DNA strand doesn't change as often, but COVID changes, every 6, 8 months. So, but they were still dealing with the vaccine from 2020 in the beginning of the first 6 months of 2021. And so that's why more people died of COVID in 2021 when the vaccines were ready and there and out than died in 2020 under Donald Trump when it was a
So,
new.
so you think that the how shall we say, the fast rollout of it had something to do with the ineffectiveness of it?
No, not for that strand. What I'm saying by 2021, it came out after the election. They made sure of that. And that vaccine was ready before the election. And for my research, because I wrote the book in the end of 2020. And I had done a lot of analysis. I did 20 shows on COVID. Even in 2020, I never stopped doing my shows in person in the studio. And I did take Johnson and Johnson vaccine, which was not an mRNA. I was not going, from what my research showed, I was not going to be a guinea pig. But I don't think that for normal, well-to-do, well-feeling, not with obesity, turned out to be the number one comorbidity under COVID. I don't know if people know that. Not cancer, not diabetes, not congestive heart failure, not CVAs, which is a stroke if you've had. Um, so really obesity, because it was pushing so much already on your lungs and your heart. Obesity, more people died with the diagnosed comorbidity of obesity than anything else from COVID. But no, I don't. I'm saying what the DNA strand changes, the RNA, the DNA change. And by 2021, that DNA strand had changed to another. I did
You
some
know,
shit on the strands.
what I'm appreciating with what you're saying, and I wanted to underline it for the listeners, is you seem to know a lot about this. You're not a doctor, but you've been kind of, I'll say you've been kind of woven into the medical industry with your businesses and your background, but you have a lot of really good information, and you present it in a way that's neither for or against the vaccine. You're just kind of putting out there and just kind of like, here's some facts that kind
Right.
of go around it, which I think helps people navigate, this, not only COVID, but some of the hindsight, if you will, from what we've heard about it. What other information that have you come across that you think could do the same thing for people to give
Let's.
them that information?
I was in healthcare for 25 years in
Right.
home and in sleep apnea. But in home health, of course, we ran against all kinds of diseases. And I have an MBA also, but I did go back to school and I did all the prerequisites for nursing and got accepted in the lake. But it was all the classes in were in the daytime. It wasn't
See,
just
more good, valuable information for people to know that they're getting this from somebody who's not only qualified, but knows how to get the information and
right. And I did
present it.
20 shows with Dr. Peter McCullough. I did too. As
Right.
I know, who flew in to my studio here in Baton Rouge. But also I did nurses here, doctors here. I did shows on how education was faring with the remote, and back then you knew it wasn't faring well. I did shows, I will say one or two good things may have come out of COVID, that we learned how to do things a little better, some things remotely that have turned out to be good. More of the, like I call Walmart's now to get my stuff delivered. We get everything delivered now, which reminds me of when I was a little girl, when the milkman used to come in the foremost truck and deliver the milk to the house. So are we going back to the future, right? Like
Right.
the movie says. And some things are good, but what I see with COVID is that I think the vaccine worked okay for the first strand, But by 21, the strand, the middle to end, second, third, quarter, it had changed. It was a lot of strands out there. I did shows with an infectious disease doctor too. I did 2 shows with her, who was an expert on COVID.
So is this with during this research and writing the book on it, is this something that kind of awakened the sleeping giant in you when you really became more involved in taking your show to become more informative about what's happening with politics in our country and our communities?
I know I started the show. I've been doing it 9 years now, so that was 2020. But COVID, what they were trying to do with COVID, to me, I could always see it because I did a show in March of 2020, March of 2020 when it came in here, and Donald Trump had already closed the border from China, which was the best thing he could have done. But in that show, I called it the Wuhan virus. I had a on because of Corona. People were talking about, can I drink beer? Corona beer, and the actual in the microscope, the Corona cell, the virus cell looks like a Corona crown. That's why it's called Corona. Cold is a coronavirus, but it's a group of viruses called Corona.
So now we're kind of hopping back and forth in your timeline, which I think is valuable because some of your information that you've given us, while it hasn't been in a timeline fashion, I think it's important to be able to go back a little bit and get the information, then come back to where we are because you're talking about things that I think people not only need to hear, but when you go back to when you first had the passion to start your show 9 years ago, was it just to have a show, or was there a lot of passion involved? Did you have a vision when you started the show that one day you wanted to be able to really take it to inform people, or was it just like to have a show on your experience? And then getting back to where we were in this timeline, did that kind of reinvigorate you to take it to another level?
That's a great question. I started the show because Obama, that was when he was leaving, and he was talking about ISIS was a JV team. And I'm thinking this makes no sense in the world. They're killing people. And Black Lives Matter. I started it because I saw what Black Lives Matter group was. Not the Black Lives, just saying Black Lives Matter, right? All lives matter. And I said it back then. And of course, I don't have many Black friends in the Black community for my stance, even 9 years ago, that all lives matter. And yes, Black lives definitely matter. But the group, and I saw it then, to me, I don't care that you're gay. Two of the 3 women that started it are gay, but they look like shanksters to me. And I think they ended up being that way. They never paid taxes, we found out.
Mm-hmm.
They gave a lot of money to Act Blue, which is basically a money laundering and campaign fundraising arm of the Democratic Party. And they really kind of started meeting with the White House at that time, Obama, from my research. So I was never enthused with Ferguson. And when I went back and looked, a lot of those people are bussed in and paid agitators in this,
Right.
even what's going on with the Palestine people. I heard one woman talking, I make $90,000 a year doing this, is what she said, were at the universities,
Wow. Wow.
violent against. So I have a grand suspicion of who's causing these people to do this, right? Who's paying for it? Well, George Soros is a big thorn in the America's side, right? That you see the
They make a lot of money. They make a lot of money when there's unrest in the world.
That's right.
And they have found a way to launder money legally
Yes,
simply by creating narratives,
yes,
agitating the flames and stirring up the flames and agitating the crowd to be able to make it a bigger issue. And then, of course, they influence people in Congress and in DC to be able to create legislation and stir it up a little bit more. They
right.
make money on the policies. They make money on the agitation. They make money off of creating the narratives, and they got it coming going whichever way they want it. It's like I said, it's a form of money laundering, in my opinion, what they're doing,
Yeah.
and they're benefiting it off the backs of the American people.
But I think it's really money laundering. I have a suspicion and have been told by some people that, Democrats tend to want war. Okay. Why do they want war? Eisenhower, if you read back in history, even talks about the Pentagon industrial war complex, right? Eisenhower, who
Mhm.
was a very great president. People don't know enough if you go back and read about General Dwight Eisenhower and what he did when and even in the black community, he sent our National Guard down to Little Rock, Arkansas to help integrate that school system. And I think that was in the 50s. He was really a great general and a great president for the
Mhm.
United States of America. He was a Republican. But I just think we don't know our history. But back to what you're saying, George Soros, and I think they get money laundering through a lot of war. I really do. If you give Ukraine, which we've given them, what, $130 billion in 2.5 years, why? Okay,
Right.
who's right next to them? Poland and Germany. People, get your map out, your globe, and look. We're a long way away from them. And I'm not saying we shouldn't help, but we should be a part of the system of our friends in Europe, right? We should not be the lead on you.
Right.
Why are we the lead on Ukraine?
We should be doing things that promote peace
That's right.
instead of stoking the fires with
That's right.
weapons and money. That's basically another form of money laundering.
Let me say, I did shows with a lady from Ukraine. She's a PhD here. She's a biophysicist. Her father was in Ukraine. I did 3 shows with her because I did one with her and her father. He escaped from Ukraine. And he's like 75 years old, maybe a little older. He escaped from Ukraine, he and 6 other people, 740 some miles, and came to America. Within 6 months, he went back to Ukraine. He would rather be in Ukraine than here. What does that say about America? And what does that say how bad the war really is in Ukraine? And I'm not saying it's not bad by any means, but he went back home. And
Right. Exactly.
too, you can see that my
So
dad
you've written a lot of books about a lot of different subjects.
5.
And what I think is important, it goes back to something I said earlier when I kind of wanted you to bring out your medical experience, to people, and you took us 25 years in the medical industry,
Yeah.
but you have a lot of other books on a lot of other issues. Would you like to tell everybody about some of your books?
I should have brought them up here. I could hold them up. But yeah, well, I've written motivational books. I write posters. Like, let me see. For Christmas, I'm giving a lot of people my posters. I'm going to be selling them in the store and on my Square app for Fuji's Totes. But if your fear stands at the backside of courage, I like, and they all have pictures. Also, I have some right in the other room. I'll go grab them in a minute. But
Wait,
happiness is after
just
every tried finding a place where there's love inside. That's when I
can
really
can they see your books at your website?
they on the website you can, it takes you there on Amazon. I have the COVID book. I have 2 fiction books that end in New Orleans, which are thrillers, suspense thrillers. And I'm writing my 6th book is about civil rights, about the wait-ins that nobody's ever heard of. Have you ever heard
Mhm.
of those,
The
William?
what?
The wait-ins.
I have, yes.
You did we? I think we even talked about it on my show, or we talked about it before. The sit-ins, everybody heard of, right? The sit-ins when the cafeterias, when Martin Luther King used to go, and other people, they drag you out and beat you up during the civil rights era. But they also had the wait-ins. You're one of few people who've ever heard of them. They're in the South mostly, but they did some in Chicago too. That if you tried to go to the beaches, they pulled black people, mostly us. If you were brown, I'm sure they pulled you off too. But and they would beat you up. It's called the wait-in. So black people and whites would organize and go to the beaches on certain days to protest, just like Martin Luther King did the sit-ins. We
Right.
also had swim-ins, and we went to swimming pools. There's one in St. Augustine, Florida, that's very famous. Martin Luther King was there. He did not go to the hotel where they had it in St. Augustine, and they planned a swim-in at the pool at the hotel. That hotel still stands. In fact, I've been trying to get to St. Augustine for a year because I want to get one of the ladies who's 102 years old, still living, who was there. And I've spoken to her, but I've never been able to get there yet. It look like something always happens, some hurricane or something here or there. But they poured lye into the pool when the black people jumped in. Martin Luther King did a sit-in St. Augustine. They put him in jail. He sat there and he wrote letters to rabbis over the country to ask them to participate in the sit-in because you couldn't go, blacks could register, kind of, but it would have been a mess. So Jewish people, about 10 or 15 registered, because if you were a registered occupant of the hotel, they couldn't, you could go to the pool and they couldn't. So black people snuck into their rooms. This is all planned. They snuck into their rooms. Then, let's say it was 2 o'clock in the afternoon. They said, hey, go, run out to the pool. And they went to Jewish people's rooms. So Jewish people and black people had great ties together and helping each other in civil rights. I don't know what the problem may be
So
now.
let's go back to when you put the dye in the pool, the lye in the
I'm
pool.
getting to that.
Oh,
Okay.
okay, okay.
The pool. The policeman, the guard there poured lye, and so did the hotel manager poured lye into the pool. And it's a picture out there. If you look this up, the officer pulls his gun out. He's in uniform. He jumps into the pool, pulls his uniform gun out, and points it at people to get out of the pool. It's the most stupid thing you've ever seen. But after that, Martin Luther King called Lyndon Johnson, and about less than 2 months later, it may have been 3 or 4 weeks later, the Civil Rights Bill of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 65 were signed. Lyndon Johnson called people at, he used to be the majority whip. And he said, we can't have Negroes getting lye poured on them in the pool. That was a big event. That was one of the last stands that Martin Luther King did, and one of the last he had to do.
Well, that's pretty interesting. What happened with the lye, though?
Writing a book on that now. That's my last. That'll be my 6th book whenever I finish.
All right, we have to talk about that when we get it. So, with all of these books, is there any information that you might have found out later after you wrote the books that might be eye-opening for some people? Some good information that you find that might enlighten some people after the fact.
Sure, and it is COVID. During COVID, right? Amazon, Netflix, all those kinds of carriers made 500 billion, $500 billion in 1 year. Because what were we doing during COVID? Locked in the house, especially out there with the stupid governors who kept their people locked up so long, right? California, New York, those kinds of places. What were you doing? Ordering food, watching Netflix, ordering everything off Amazon.
Right.
People tripled what they normally. And I think that was one reason a lot of them wanted us locked up even more. Netflix, you couldn't go to the theater. You could go to the casino, but you couldn't go to church either, right?
Right.
Which was a big problem. So I even in my investigation in 2020 for the book in 21, and it came at the beginning of 21, I saw that they were saying, about the bat. That bat is not a habitant of that area, Wuhan. In that province, which they call their states,
right,
called provinces, like Canada and most of the world, we call our states. But it's about 400 or 500 miles away. So it had to be either on purpose or by mistake that he escaped, that virus escaped out of that lab.
Right.
And they wanted, it's what they call a security 4 lab, which that's the highest security you can be. But they had many problems with their lab as far as being as secure as it should be. So it could have been a mistake, but I'll tell you this, he locked every state down. You couldn't go interstate. Like Wuhan province could not go to the next state over. Okay. Everybody had to stay within their state. He did do that. Then when they were flying people all over the world, he let people fly out, but you couldn't fly within China. So he knew what was going on all the time. And there have been people who were working at the labs that have made comments about, and they talked about people who wanted to tell the truth who got killed. One lady did, I can't remember her name now. I'd have to go back to my book. But she did get over here and they were holding her family. You may have heard her on some of the conservative channels. They did talk to her. She was a PhD. She was working in one of the labs.
And what was her name again?
I can't remember her name.
Okay.
I have to go back to my book and look. That was like 4 years.
So before COVID, were you thinking more of just local issues and informative issues? And you from the get-go, you've always wanted to do national issues.
Yeah, because I started with Obama was about ISIS, right? It was about the war over there and what we were doing. Why did we leave $75 billion of our equipment there? Then we come up 5 years later, and what do? We leave $85 billion under Biden Harris, this incompetent.
See the good when I go backward in time a little bit in our interview, I get unique information out. A lot of people forgot about that. There's been 2 times when America has left a lot of information. Coincidentally, it was Obama first, and then Biden, who was Obama's vice president, next.
Right, right. But that their plan was to deplete our military. So Trump goes in, he builds it back up in 4 years. But that isn't a travesty. The real a tragedy and travesty is that they gave them Bagram Air Force Base, which
Right.
he was really ours, the best Air Force base in the world, worth probably $300 billion, that we had gone in and built up that again. It didn't need a whole lot to be built up. People need to get a globe. You need to go and look at where Afghanistan is. You need to go look at where Bagram, which was in Afghanistan. Go look at Russia, how far it is, right there next to it. Go look at China, right
Well,
there.
and
They're all,
China moved into Afghanistan after we withdraw. So China got all of our equipment,
and
and
they got
they're in the area now.
that's right. And so Russia did too. They got some too. But as we know, Russia and China are working together because Russia makes most of their money off oil and things, right? China doesn't have a lot of oil. And
Right.
so they're buying all Russian oil, as Joe Biden was the first 2 years of this administration. He was buying. How can you buy oil from people that you're fighting in Ukraine? And now we're
Right.
buying Venezuela, audience. We're buying it from another communist country. People that know their world history. 30 years ago, Venezuela was the fourth richest economy in the world. Fourth. They
Right.
still have the number one oil reserves in the world right now is under the Venezuelan soil. So you tell me, why are these people starving in the street? And why do we bring Tren de Agua into America from Venezuela, and all their money is going back to Venezuela? $7 billion left this country last
It
year.
it's
On
it's all part of their master
That's right.
plan.
Bring us down and to pull them up.
That's exactly right.
Control everybody. Tren de Agua, Lord, I think Trump's going to be the first people that Trump tries to get out of this country. And I looked up, I'm so inquisitive, the math, the 2 + 2 has to equal 4. It means train to de Agua. So it's like a train. We're coming here and we're sending it back, I guess is what they're saying. But that's what train means in Venezuela.
Creating a network, so to speak,
Yeah,
or a
yeah.
channel. So, Diane, regularly on my show, I ask my guest really what I think is one of the most important questions, and I never get tired of talking about freedom and liberty. And some of my listeners go, "You're always talking about freedom and liberty." It always sounds, and I always say this: everybody thinks of freedom and liberty either a little bit differently,
Mm-hmm.
or they have a different thought, or they might have a different perspective on where they think we are losing freedom and liberty in our country. So I
Mm-hmm.
want to ask you, with all of your unique experience, your books, your travels, the different businesses that you've been in, I know that you have a unique perspective on where you might think we are losing freedom in America. So that would be the next thing I want to talk about with you is, where do you think we're losing freedom in America?
I'll start off by saying this. I love America. I've been to 35 countries. When I was with IBM, I worked all over the world doing process reengineering and other things. Like Mercedes was one of my accounts. I went to the world meeting in Stuttgart.
Yeah.
I've been all over, and I'm usually the only Black person there, and that's okay with me, or the only woman. I mean, it's good to have more, but if
Or
not,
both.
yeah, it's okay. Yeah, and because I think I can hold my own, and I've done a pretty good job with pretty much most people, right? Because at IBM there was no DEI. You took a
Right.
test and you had to pass it to get in. There was MEI, merit, and I do believe in that. But where I think that's when you really look at it, to me, as we give people things they don't deserve, that's causing us a whole generation of people. People can't even write their signature anymore, William. I mean, they're not even.
Right.
We used to go to cursive, right, when we were young, right?
Right.
They can't even write their name. So it's very complex, but very simple. How the evil people who have run this country are doing this. They're dumbing down America, so we won't be a world power. They're hitting us from every angle, right?
Right.
And I think as we're so dumb, their goal is the evil people. Have you ever heard of the Bilderberg Group and the other kind of groups
Right.
in the world who want to control the world? In America and even Europe, right? We're probably the most advanced places in the world. They want, like what Bill Clinton did with NAFTA, and Donald Trump took it back. But they've already built up. You go to Mexico City now; they've got a rail system that's nice and beautiful. We don't even have it in America. Even our not just Amtrak, I mean the subway system too. They have a great subway system now in Mexico City. They have built up in the last 30 years. Donald Trump talked about this, and we built down. It doesn't make sense for our roads to have the potholes and things in them that you can't get anything fixed. And you have, I may be going around a different way to answer your question, but you can't. Like right now, I got a pothole in front of my building on Florida, the busiest street in the city. I called to get it fixed. And Florida is a state and a local highway. So I called. The state came out there that day. They said, well, it's right at the corner of this little side street. It's really more their job to go get it fixed. Okay, so I called the city. And they say, oh, it may take us about a month to get out there. First, we're going to have to come out and we're going to have to do an analysis and then we'll get it fixed. This pothole is this big. I'm surprised, it's a foot long.
Right.
And I'm thinking, a month to fix a pothole. But that's where our city government and state seems to be much more efficient to me than the city does. National, that's another case. But we've got what? People sitting at home, only 6% of our workforce in Washington, D.C., which is, what is it, 100,000 people work in D.C. for the federal government? And
Oh, I think it might be more than that. Who knows?
let's say 350,000, something like that. But only 6% come into the office once or twice a week.
And I have mixed feelings on that, Dianne.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do. I have two different feelings. One, I think if our government were to use that as a way to reduce the amount of office space they had to maintain and build or purchase, and they sold it off to private industry, and they put that paid off our put that towards our national debt, so to speak, and they were able to set people up at home. I think that would save the government some money. They might see it as a way that maybe they don't have to pay people as much money. So maybe if they did it that way. Now, like you, I also think the other side of it is that I think when people go to an office, there's more camaraderie, which helps with productivity, which keeps people more in the game because they're there. So they're going to be naturally more productive in some ways. And it's easier to weed out the good and the bad from the crowd. So you're able to monitor things a little bit better and make things a little bit more productive. So that's, I think, so the flip side of that. I think that, right now we as a country don't know the real benefits or downfalls of either because we haven't had it for a long enough time. It's just really started since COVID. I mean, it was being done before COVID. I know that, but it really was put on steroids. That way of doing business was put on steroids because of COVID. So now it's probably going to take a few years to really see, is it more efficient? Or is it hurting our businesses and industries?
Elon Musk, who got rid of people, he told you, come back in that office or you're fired. And he reduced the workforce down to 20% of what it was. And he said, I think now he's getting to making the same amount of money. I've seen studies on it before, and you are not as productive. I remember during COVID, and when I did the education show, right, I had people who would, teachers who were going out selling real estate during the day. I have never, maybe one day a week, a couple of days a month, if you've done a good job, you let people work from home. But I don't think it's a practice because people get too lax, is what the studies I've read. William says about it, but that's a very good point. They will sell, but the problem is how many years it's going to take you. And Washington, see all the bills right there together. It's all government structure.
But just don't let the people who work from home do the study on where they're more productive at home or office.
No,
because then your study might be a little slanted, right?
Yeah. No, they can't do the study from home. They'd be crazy.
No, I know, but you know what I'm saying. I'm kind of making.
I've seen though on all remote, and you brought up the points that are so important. Camaraderie is so important. I remember I used to tease my nurses when I had home health aides. I had 150 people. I got out of that 4 years ago. And we would go out and see elderly and all kinds of diseases. I had speech therapists, RNs, nurse practitioners, CNAs, then MSW, social workers, but and all kind of therapists. We would go to the home and see the patients. But I remember I would see them come in and talking about different patients together. Okay, I saw this today with the patient, right? You may be the therapist on the patient, and somebody else because all the records are in the office where we keep the medical records.
Right.
And then we would have a monthly meeting where they would come and everybody show what they were seeing going on, because certain people miss certain things because it's not their area, right?
Right.
And so it was amazing. I'm going to tell you, the CNA, the sort of nursing assistants, because they take your clothes off, they bathe the people, they assess them up and down, and they were
Right.
the best. They were some of the best at really knowing what's going on with the person. But it was so good, that camaraderie, you cannot put a figure, I think, on that.
Right.
No, a dollar figure, but it is worth everything for it. Even if you're making a product, if everybody's got their little point of it. And when people are there, even at IBM, when I would, have meetings, weekly meetings, and people talk about their problems. I mean, when you're never in the office, I mean, like Joe Biden hadn't had a staff meeting in 9 months until the other day. How can that be? How can your staff not talk about how this country is running, right?
Right.
Cabinet, I call it the staff.
So
Mhm.
let's go backwards a little bit more. I want you to elaborate a little bit more on the question on where we're losing freedom in America.
We're losing freedoms because our people won't be able to do the work in this country. So if you don't do the work, we send it out to where? We're going to send it to Honduras. We're going to send it to India. To me, and I tell you, I'm going a roundabout way, and it's not really, I think, okay, like even going to the airport now, right? You feel like you're going to prison. You got to go through, it's not free to even fly anymore because of what? I don't know if it's 9/11, COVID, everything. Um,
What's interesting, and I want to highlight, go
mhm.
ahead, finish what you're saying.
To this, because tell me how you would say what you think we've lost, William.
Well, I have been I've been fortunate to interview so many people and ask this question to so many different people and get so many replies, that I think that there are so many holes in the bucket of freedom that that we can see right now,
Mm-hmm.
that eh, I don't even want to say that there's even a bucket anymore. There are so many places we're losing our freedom that people don't realize. When I started that quest to ask that question of every
Yeah.
guest on my show, it used to be First Amendment, Second Amendment. But when you start looking at
We
bureaucratic
have lost
agents,
that, though, have we?
what's that?
The freedom of speech, yes, they try to do that, but we still have the
We've
freedom.
lost it in some ways. We've lost our Second Amendment rights in many ways because of the regulation of, let's say, suppressors, or as they like to call them, silencers.
Yeah.
There's a lot of way that the ATF has created lots of laws. So let me say this: our bureaucratic agencies have created so many laws that govern us within those agencies that circumvent our Constitution, because they're able to set up these rules and regulations outside of Congress because
Mm-hmm.
they've got authority within that bureaucratic agency, that we're losing our freedoms and liberties in lots of little bitty places. We like to have we have the perception that we're totally free. But
Mm-hmm.
when it comes down to different things that we want to do, we find all the little rules and regulations that govern our freedoms. But what I want to pivot back to is where you're going, which I think is amazing, Dianne. This is one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on the show so much. Is you're going in a direction that shows how keyed into this you are. In essence, we'll say, when I asked you about freedom and liberty, you're going more into when you're going more into how the government is making us, work from home,
Yeah.
and you're talking about the outsourcing of jobs. People might not realize how much of an effect that has on freedom,
Right.
but when you look at it as a part of the bigger problem, that government is learning to control things in unique ways. And if government controls where we work from,
Right.
it makes it easier for businesses and even government to outsource
Right.
jobs, because there's nobody showing up to the office. So for all we know, the government could be outsourcing American jobs to somebody in Mexico or Argentina or in
Yeah.
Europe, because I mean, granted, there's safeguards. I get it, right? You have to be American citizen or whatever the case may be. But even still, there's enough people that have found the workaround that we are losing freedom of the workplace.
Right.
If the government is controlling where we work from, they can control, on even great scale, who they can get away with hiring. And I
But
think that's
and
some.
bigger than the place only. If we're dumbed down, we can't do the
Right.
jobs anymore. So they're going to replace us with people from other countries, and they're bringing their workforce in. Now,
Right.
that's the biggest part of freedom right there, the illegal immigration. That's the biggest
Right.
loss of freedom in the last years in this country, because they will train these people. I have nephews who teach. They said these little kids that come in from these other countries are so ready to learn. They're speaking English after 6 months, and we're becoming dumbed down. And they're telling them, put them in the schools like Johnson and Nut up in
Right.
Chicago. And we're doing it here in Baton Rouge too. And people may not know they had something called the humanitarian parole program with 4 countries that we flew people in. They didn't get, and it's legal. They're here legally.
Right.
Humanitarian parole program. Look it up. That Biden and Harris started. If he knew whose
And
dog knows,
all
he.
these little things all chip away at freedom and the freedom and liberty of the
I
American people.
don't do the gun thing. We did a show on your gun, which is great. I wish I had a husband that could shoot.
Well,
Protect me, because I think that's very important.
Diane, if you would have been with me, I would have protected you too.
No, no, you know what I mean. I told you I drove all the way to Las Vegas with about 2 dogs. My nephew that can't eat, doesn't drive, and all I had was Mace. But God was with me,
He was with you.
and my mother was on the wing. That's right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think it's remarkable. I love your answer. I think that's remarkable, and it's a fantastic way to show yet another realm, if you will, where freedom and liberty is being lost in that, in the workplace.
Right.
And as the workplace changes, it affects future generations
Right.
on their, I mean, granted, we could think, oh, well, everybody can work from home, it makes it even easier to work. But the reality is, when the government is lowering the bar on who they hire and who they could, because of who they bring into this country, it
Right.
makes it easier for them to outsource jobs and change the workplace in a way that also, if you make it standard, if you standardize it where people are working from home more, businesses will lose in efficiency. Plus, businesses will also lose workers, because more people are going to go to a job with the government that they get more holiday pay, and they can stay at home, instead of a business that finds that it's more effective and efficient to have people in the workplace. People are going to
You're right.
gravitate.
That's right.
That's a great answer, Diane.
Yeah, thanks. But because people don't realize the games that these people are playing. They're bringing in the next people they want to take over, not just the crops, but they're putting them in schools too. So they
Right.
good educations and everything is free. They're taking up our hospital space. I had to get my passport renewed the other day. And it was one woman here in Baton Rouge, and it's one woman. There were 20 people out there. And don't get me wrong, I believe in illegal immigration. Okay, I believe in that. My people on my mother's side were bought over here, as slaves. Let's be real, right? They were, but we're bringing. It's a push and a pull, right? They're pulling these people
Right.
into into this country, and there's a certain sector of them they want to make as part of the people who can work. And do you know how loyal they're going to be to them coming from where they came from? They're teaching them before they teach our children. And because our children, a lot of them in the public school system, which is nothing but a money laundering organization that Jimmy Carter bought as a cabinet level spot in 1979. Before that, it was not a cabinet level spot. It was
Right.
it was to the states, which is where the Constitution wants most things.
Right.
But things like that. I guess I got to talk about that. That's a way they're taking away our freedoms too, right? From the state, they're taking it and putting it up there in the national.
Well,
That's
the way they're doing that is they create all these government programs,
right.
and the funding of it that they offer to the states, and say, hey, state of Louisiana or whatever, or, hey, hey, 50 states, if you all do this regulation or teach this in your schools, or do this, the government will give you another, $500 million for your
Right.
budget. And
Right.
so the federal government pierces the 10th Amendment of the Constitution. They've pierced that veil of the 10th Amendment through federal funding, and that's how they do that. But I love you've given me two answers on freedom. One, we're losing freedom in the workplace, and two, we're losing it through illegal immigration.
Right.
And I think that's really important. So speaking of illegal
Those are
immigration,
bigger than some. The gun, of course, that's big, but it's not as big. These two affect pretty much everybody. All the government workers, but immigration affects everybody. That,
Well,
that's
let's
right.
pivot again on our show because I know we gotta wind up here in a few minutes.
The book real quick.
What's that?
Can I go in another room and get my COVID book to show people?
Absolutely.
I'll be right back.
So Dianne has written several books on not only COVID, but as you heard earlier in the show, she's written a ton of other books. I say a ton of other books. She's written 5 other books, and I've seen all of them. She just does it as a way to stay not only active in the community, but she does it as a way to be able to inform other people. And I think it's really interesting. It's one of the reasons I brought her on the show today to be able to not only show what she knows, but to be able to help people find another way to be able to be involved in our communities, be involved in our country, and find their own pathway, if you will. So when she comes back, we're going to talk about those books a little bit, but also talk about where we're losing our country. And I think she'll give a unique perspective. I did a little talk with her before we came on the interview on talk a little bit about how things are going with our elections and how things are turning out in our country on a national level.
Okay, I'm coming.
All right, there she is. She's coming back with some books.
Hey, boys, my boys
So,
in there running.
so Dianne, as we wrap up our interview a little bit here, show us your books, and you got some posters, and where people go on your sites and see it.
Okay, this is the you can see the Katrina storm. That's the second fiction book. It's Eye of Revenge. Third Man, I was in the other room. I didn't have time to get it. But if you go to that website and you can click on different things. It'll take you to Amazon.
Okay, I'll put the site up again.
I'm really proud of the COVID book. Can you see it? Yeah.
Yes, COVID
COVID
cover up,
19.
cover up. Yeah.
Cover up ID 2019. The word COVID is in there. COVID 19. COVID.
Yes, I see it.
There, yeah. I just think of things. God is good. He gives me a lot of but this has, and I wrote this. I talk about in the first 6 months of COVID, only six states had 80% of all the COVID cases in the nursing homes is in this book. And that's a true fact. New York, I talked about Como in here, what he was going to do, what he was doing. And it turned out that's in this book. That's on that.
I love it. I love it.
And this is my motivation. I've written 500 motivational quotes.
I love it.
My fourth and fifth book are not, I didn't bring them out, but these are big. You can buy these on my Square. When you go to www.freedom is not free. There's a price for you and for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Beautiful picture on them.
I love that. That's amazing.
I'm gonna have to give you that one next time I see you. I'm giving them as Christmas gifts to my friends. A mother's love I wrote this for my mother when she was dying. Is the tie that binds to guide and protect you for all and more than your lifetime. Your wife would like that one.
There we go.
Yeah. Being yourself is you at your best. Let's see. Okay. I just bought 3 or 4 of them. Being yourself. But all of them have a beautiful motivational picture to go with them. Women.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I've written 500. Where you going, boys? I think that's all I bought. Yeah.
Dianne, you covered up the screen.
Yeah.
There. So Dianne, as we take this point of our interview and pivot to what excites you, motivates you about things that are going on a national level, I think that the last election, it went kind of like we all wanted it to here on this show, and but it also kind of went differently than we might have expected, or differently than what we were worried about. Any analysis that you want to give on it?
Yeah, of course. Just congratulations to Donald Trump. Anybody who knows me, and I have a lot of enemies, especially Black, who knows I was always for Donald Trump. I always felt that this man would change this country. Number one, because he didn't have to do this. He wanted to do it because he loves America. And if you can't see that in the beginning, and he's much different today, it seems, than he was. He's a perfect politician, it seems like now. He knows what to say, how to act. But that other didn't bother me. I grew up as 19-year in IBM, and those guys would get us in there and say, "God damn it, get it done."
Right.
And if women never heard those words, like they're so sweet and tender, they're not going to kill you when people get upset that things aren't going right. And everybody was against him every day. What was the question? Because I went around somewhere else.
No, about how things turned out in the last election. It turned out a little bit differently than what we were worried about, I'll say.
Right. And,
And I know if you want to have anything, if there was anything that you have to enlighten people on a different point of view that might be unique to what they're hearing in the public right now.
we remember it's probably not unique, but X, they shut down the president of the United States, which now Elon Musk owns, and that's back to the remote workplace. He told people, go, come in or get out.
Right.
And he has 20%, I think, of what he had before. He's still making a lot of money, and I think X is doing good. And then you had the 18 states in this country. Now that may be enlighten people a little bit that don't require a voter ID to vote. Is that insane?
That's insane.
Insane. So
that is insane.
On News Nation, Dan Abrams was talking. He said he went in New York, right, to vote, and he handed them his ID. And they said, "Oh, we don't need that." He said, "You don't?" He said, "No, we don't do voter ID here." New York State, the biggest states, and 14 of those states, the 14 that Calamity Jane won, Kamala Harris, is are those 14 of those 18, those 14 states she won voter ID. California, the biggest states in the country.
Right.
Illinois, Washington State. A friend of mine lives there. He said, yeah, they did it. I asked him, when did they do that? About 10 years ago. They've been doing it in California for about 12, 15 years. And Oregon and now Nevada. They started in COVID and they continued it. Those are some of the states that no vote with no voter ID. We need absentee voting here. We still have to send a copy.
Right.
Kamala was always talking about, Black people, stop the identity politics. Black people do anything anybody else can do. You got poor white people in this country. Everybody wants, you got the CRT thing going on, critical race theory. I did 9 shows on critical race theory. And I heard one white lady said, I was raised in a foster home and different foster homes. She said, I was raped in every one that I was in. So you tell me how my life is better and I'm oppressing Black people. And it's
right.
Everybody, there are more poor white people in this country than Black. You're a larger population.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And look, and just like when they refer to the welfare system, they talk about how many Black people are in the welfare system. There's actually more white people in the welfare system than there are Black people.
What the welfare system was about 5 years ago, I don't know what it is today, about 25% Black. We're about 13, 14% of the population, so it's a little bit over. But white people tend to think that the welfare system is all Black. That's not true. It's not 75% Black. It's 25, 22. Right. And I said that was a statistic I remember from 5 years.
Because the Black population is a smaller population, it just equates that there's a larger percentage of Black people in the population that are on welfare than the white population percentage, on that. But it's but as we've talked about or alluded to earlier, it was almost designed that way when they created the welfare system and they took the father out of the home as a way to destroy the family.
That's right.
They were targeting the Black family because the Black family actually had a lower divorce rate than white families when you go back to the 50s. The Black family also had a higher entrepreneurial rate than white families, and Black children scored equally on standardized testing as did white children. So when you look at what happened after the Civil Rights Act and after the welfare system was created, you can compare before and after and see that the downfall of the Black family came after those civil rights were enacted. And what's that?
I think that the people that were prejudiced, which there were a lot back then, they still had to find a way to keep Black people down. And I think, okay, we're going to give you this, but the long-term strategy was to destroy the Black family.
Right, exactly.
And they did that. And
exactly
right. White families too, because I think Black people are 75% of Black kids grew up with no daddy. How can that work? That's right. But I think that's like 35% on the white family. Isn't it? It's gotten much higher in the last 10 years.
And if you look at the crime statistics, you can see where that's had the worst effect.
Yeah, there's a strategy in this country from mostly Democrats, and we've got some bad apples in the Republican Party. I don't know about Mitch McConnell in this, but we know how he is, and we're happy to see him be leaving as the
right.
of our party in the Senate, and leaving the Senate period in 2 years. In fact, he's in a wheelchair now. I saw the other day. You got Nancy Pelosi just broke her hip. Nobody wished
Right.
on anybody, and now
Right.
wheelchair. These people, you just have to wheel them out of the
Their
Senate.
their struggle, their quest for power or their thirst for power, it far exceeds their service and loyalty to their country.
It's not about service, and most
No.
people go into politics now. I call it legal stealing, just like with ministers now. It's not about service to God. A lot of them, it's about legal stealing, right? And
Right.
people need, if you can't make it in a lot of places, okay, I'm gonna go be a preacher.
Or a politician, right?
Or the preacher, you don't have to get voted in, will you?
Right, exactly. Well, Dianne, let's wrap up here for our listeners because we're going to do this again sometime. On some other topics. I've just
Yeah,
enjoyed your
watch on my YouTube. The YouTube is www.youtube.com// Dianne Andrews Show, 2 N's and an E. And you'll see, if you want to know anything about gun control and what your host here has done up in Alexandria, you should go see how he saved his wife's life and his life.
That's right. I did the interview on your show, and I really appreciate it. And I would love for people to go see your show more, Diana. You've had some great guests on your show.
I just
And,
did him trafficking with Father Behe with the house up here, the safe house.
well, you bring on some really great people, not only on a local level but on a national level. And I think that if more people were now that they've gotten to know you a little bit and know what you have to offer and know that and kind of I guess see your personality now, I think they're really going to like the shows that you did. So if they go to your website or they go to your YouTube channel and watch some of those interviews, I think they're really going to not only learn a lot and get to see a lot of good guests, but they're going to find you to be somebody that's not only very enlightening, but very involved in a way that they might be able to follow in your footsteps.
I would appreciate that because I'll end with this. One of my sayings is, I want to leave a path of goodness for others to follow.
That's
And
awesome.
just said it right there. Yeah.
That really is good. Should we end on that, or do you have any other final words?
My last, sometimes I speak at colleges sometimes, and I speak around if anyone needs speakers. But I took, let me see if I can remember it real quickly. I took 5 of my my inspirations, and I said we want to smile more than we frown. That's on one of my motivations, because at the end of the day, our failures are reversed in the mirror. That's one of my sayings. And all what we're looking for is happiness is at the end. Happiness is, oh, dog, I'm forgetting the saying. But anyway, I say some of my sayings at the end to wrap it up. I'm not doing it. I'd have to go look at them and say, smile more than you frown, because we're all just not going to be around. Yeah, I think it said.
But you know what, though, Diane? If they go get your book,
Yeah, they'll
they're
see.
going to be able to find all of these in your book.
Yeah, I've got you. Like I said, William, I've been so busy working on stuff. I never took the time to sell the stuff, and now I've got to find. I need anybody, good social media person, let me know to push my. Really pretty good. I really put a lot of time and effort into making them good for you all, and I think I learn a lot doing the show. So I want people to learn and to really understand what this country is really about, and it is the best place in the world.
I love it. Diane, thank you so much. Hang on there 1 second. I'm going to ask the guests and the people that have listened to our show, watched our video, listened to the podcast, to please share this show, share this interview with other people you think might be interested. Not only would I be grateful, but I know that Dianne Andrews would appreciate it also, because she and I are working really hard in our communities and our country to not only show all the great things that we can love America, but all the reasons to love America, but also all the great ways that our involvement have as a positive effect on our communities and our country. And I would appreciate it. Thank you so much, everybody. Again, have a great day, and God bless America.
God bless you. Bye bye. Thanks, William. Loved it.